I have always loved food. This is me at about 3. My grandparents were farmers, or they were dairy farmers. So I was thinking about food at a very young age. And as I grew up, I continued being interested. So on weekends, I would work with an organic farm at the farmer's market, helping them to talk to people about organic food. And I went on to get a certificate in permaculture design, looking at agricultural design and how we design systems. And in 2008, I decided to move to Beijing. That was the year of the Olympics. It was really exciting. I got to watch a lot of the games. And that wasn't the only thing that happened in Beijing in 2008. In China, we also think of 2008 for a major food safety scandal. Here in September, this headline talks about 53,000 children made sick from tainted baby formula. The thing is, that wasn't the end of it. By the end of this food safety scandal, there were over 300,000 children who were made sick. 6 children were reported dead from melamine in the baby formula. And several executives from the company were executed. So one would think that this would have been fixed and we wouldn't have it happen again. But a short time later, a similar thing happened. Now, melamine is a type of plastic. Farmers were putting plastic in the milk so that when it was tested by the buyers, it would look like it had a higher protein rate, a higher protein amount in the milk, which the milk companies wanted. That wasn't the only food supply chain scandal. We also had watermelons, where the farmers were applying a lot of growth accelerant so that they would grow faster, ripen earlier, because the farmers that can get their watermelons to market earlier make more money, make a higher profit. There were fake eggs. You can combine chemicals together in a way that mask the shell and the yolk and the white of the egg. There were dead pigs floating in the river, thousands and thousands of dead pigs in the river near Shanghai. Now, the pigs died from a pig virus, from a porcine virus that doesn't affect humans, but rotting pig flesh will affect people if it's in the water. There was also the gutter oil scandal. There are 2 different types of gutter oil. One type is when a restaurant uses fresh, clean cooking oil and then sells the used oil to another restaurant, which uses it, and then sells that used oil on again. And then there's another type of gutter oil where a restaurant disposes of its used oil into the gutter, where there are cigarette butts, where there are used napkins and tissues and a lot of other dirty things, and then someone literally scrapes it out of the gutter, and they put it through a sieve, and then they resell it, and then it's used in other restaurants. So that wasn't the end. There's also restaurants and slaughterhouses selling cat meat as rabbit. We saw fox being sold as beef, all types of things. So I spent a lot of time thinking, how do we fix food safety? No one wants to eat gutter oil. No one wants to be eating cat, unknowingly. And this was a big problem. In the US, we have food supply chain scandals as well. We have food safety issues, but usually it's usually it's Listeria or E. coli or Salmonella, and it's accidental. But this was deliberate contamination of the food supply chain. Think about food safety. If we don't have food safety, we don't have food security. When we think about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, many of these goals tie in with food safety and the food supply chain. Think about farmers who want to make sure that they're making a living wage. Many farms around the world are owned or worked by women. We want to make sure that everybody has access and is able to provide for their families. So I moved back to the US, and friends started telling me about blockchain. And I love playing with technology, but I wasn't as involved then. It's like, well, it doesn't apply to me, so I wasn't paying attention. But I kept hearing it again and again. And as I learned more, I realized there's a lot of uses. Now, the main use that I was hearing about was something that didn't make sense. In fact, think back to the beginning days of the internet. Right now, we use the internet for a lot of different things. But one thing that a lot of people use the internet for is cat photos. But we can use the internet for a lot more than cat photos. I look at cat photos. That's my friend's cat, Leo. He's snuggly. He's wonderful. But usually when I'm using the internet, it's for something else. When we think about blockchain, one thing that gets the most attention right now is cryptocurrency. If you've heard of Bitcoin or Ether or Litecoin or Ripple, these are all different types of currencies. But there's a lot of other uses. In fact, there's uses in supply chain. So blockchain itself is basically a distributed ledger. Think about your ledger books, if you've ever studied accounting or done bookkeeping. Now imagine that every time you make an entry, that ledger is distributed across many different computers. We want to think about this in the supply chain. Those are cherries that I picked on a farm outside of Beijing a few years ago. It was an organic farm, so I know exactly how things were taken care of. Now, those cherries weren't being put on the blockchain. I was picking them myself. But if I'm in a store, or if I'm buying them on the internet, how do we know how they were grown? How do we know where they came from? Now imagine that information about those cherries was entered into a system. And then when those cherries are transported to the consolidator, or someone collecting cherries from around the region, information about the transportation, information about that consolidator also gets input. Imagine when those cherries are transported to the grocery store or to your neighborhood supplier. That information is also input. It's all being put, usually handheld system, it can be done a lot of ways, but then it's distributed not just into one computer or into the cloud. We put a lot of information on the cloud. Well, yes, this is going into the internet, but it's being put, here I've got 5 different computers. It's not 5 different computers. Imagine tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of different computers, we'll also say nodes, that are recording that transaction. And that transaction is being added to a chain. So there's information in the record of the previous transactions. We add in our transaction, information about those cherries. And then almost immediately after, another transaction is taking place, and information about that transaction gets added on top of ours, gets added to the next chain, and so on and so on. Now, if I wanted to go back in and change information, say I wanted to change the date that I picked the cherries, there's no way for me to do that, because in order to do that, I would need to change that record across hundreds of thousands of computers and in every single record that came afterwards. That's almost impossible to do. And there's a lot of companies right now that are developing ways to put food supply onto the blockchain in different ways. We can then think about this for traceability, which is really important for supply chains. We can think about it in the marketplace. It can also be helpful for payments. We think about smart contracts so that farmers or different people are getting their payment almost immediately after the record is input that they've supplied what they were going to. So I'm going to talk to you about several different companies, several different initiatives using the blockchain in the food supply chain, because they're being done in a lot of different ways. And I think it's interesting the different ways that companies are doing this to meet their own needs and to meet the needs of their audience. IBM was the first company that I saw getting a lot of attention around this. IBM worked with Walmart China and Tsinghua University, which is one of the highest ranked universities in China. A lot of science and technology. It's often referred to as the MIT of China. And they worked together to put pigs on the blockchain, to create a record of where the pigs came from, how they were taken care of. And this was the use case that really got a lot of other people and other companies started thinking as well. So I first started seeing this blockchain initiative in about 2016. But even before that, because IBM's a global company, Walmart's a global company, this was Walmart China. Even before that, a company in London named Provenance was doing work. Provenance was one of the first companies to do a demonstration case working with fisheries in Indonesia. And they were tagging the fish using IoT, and those tags were tracing the fish all along the blockchain. So you would know when the fish was caught, where it was caught, and then you'd know when it was put on ice, when it was being processed, when it got to your store. It took away a lot of the questions about where the fish came from. Origin Trail, company out of Slovenia. This was started by two young men right as they were finishing college. They first started by working with some Slovenian companies, putting their product line, their supply chain online. They started adding in blockchain, and now they're working with dairies. Here we see salad greens. Origin Trail has been getting a lot of attention recently because they also recently won a major award from Walmart. So Walmart's developing its own blockchain, but they're also working with other companies, and they now have a Walmart innovation program that Origin Trail is part of. Ripe.io is a US-based company, and they're doing a slightly different take on this. Ripe.io isn't just looking at traceability for the consumers to be able to track things back. Ripe.io is also putting information about the product into the blockchain that allows restaurants, that allows the companies that are buying the product. Here we're looking at tomatoes. This is their first demonstration case, was putting tomatoes on the blockchain. The buyers will be able to tell the flavor profile of those tomatoes. Think about if you've ever bought tomatoes and you're not sure how they're going to taste until you get them home. Well, if you understand the information, if you understand how to read that profile, you're going to know what it's going to taste like, so you know how your recipe is going to turn out. If you're a food producer, if you make sauce or soups or something else, you're going to be able to tell what that flavor will be and whether your customers will like it or not. Avenues GT, this is an Israeli company, and they're not looking at traceability so much. They're using the blockchain to provide a marketplace. Their first demonstration project in Rwanda, their beta in Rwanda, is helping coffee farmers. So Rwanda, a lot of us still think about the conflict, but there's amazing coffee coming out of Rwanda. And buyers from around the world don't know which suppliers to buy from. So the suppliers have a profile on this platform, and they can tell, and buyers can tell what type of coffee, what type of beans, where it was grown, how ripe it is, the quantity available. And oh yeah, the suppliers can know, are these buyers reputable? Do they pay on time? Have they been working with different farmers for a long period of time? Are they trustworthy? So it's answering questions for both sides. Zhong'an Technology is a Chinese company. I'm really excited about this project for a couple of different reasons. Zhong'an is a subsidiary of Zhong'an Insurance, which Chinese insurance company, the largest online insurer in China. Zhong'an Technology is putting chickens on the blockchain. But it's not just by tracing them by somebody entering in the information manually. These chickens are wearing sensors. So those sensors are connecting via Bluetooth. And where they're going all the way along the blockchain is being recorded by that. Now, Zhong'an is also taking this one step further. They're not just doing sensors anymore. They're also developing facial recognition technology for the chickens. So there are people right now who can invest in a chicken. You can buy a chicken when it hatches, and then you can go to the chicken farm and you can figure out where your chicken is through this technology. So I'm going to thank you all for your attention and leave you with a question. Do you know where your food comes from? Because if you don't now, you will in a couple of years.